If you guys haven't guessed already, today we are talking about penguins in animal life drawing. So, as you can see here with this little cute diagram, there's a lot of penguins. There are a lot of different species of penguins. I don't even know if this chart covers all of them, but it covers a nice variety. And it is very cartoony, but I do think it's kind of important that it shows some of the distinctions and some of the similarities as well. So, in this review, penguins, I tried my best to get a good variety of penguins, but we didn't get all of them because we're not going to go through this many penguins. That's a lot of stuff to draw, but you can see that they do have very similar qualities. They're kind of built of the same shapes. We're thinking really oval and round for that body, a nice separate head, and overall just kind of like a really smooth bullet-like shape that helps them slide and it helps them swim through the water nice and fast. So before we get to drawing these cute little guys, let's do what I always like to do, and we're going to jump into a little bit of anatomy. Alright, so for penguins, it was actually pretty hard to find pictures of anatomy. Not as easy as it is for a lot of other animals, but I just find some pretty good references. I like this one because it's, right next to a model of a penguin. And of course, just like I showed in the slide before, there's many different penguins of different heights and sizes, so they're going to have different bone structures a little bit, but what you can kind of imagine is that this bone structure that we see right here is going to just kind of be shrunken down or made bigger. So it's going to generally be the same. So a couple of things I found pretty interesting about this. Without having the muscle structure to look at, you would never really guess that all the way down to around somewhere around there is their neck, right? And then this is where their rib cage starts. So it's a pretty interesting side-by-side comparison because you don't really see that, but then at the same time, if you do think about how you've seen penguins move, if you've ever watched March with the Penguins or any of those kind of penguin movies, they are able to kind of bend their neck from different points. So being a creature that lives in Arctic conditions, usually, not all the species do, but especially this one right here, they have a lot of blubber on them. The blubber is to keep them warm, especially when they're in the freezing Arctic cold waters while they're fishing. So even though they do have a rib cage and all this structure down here, a lot of this layering here, we're not going to see any bony landmarks on these guys, except for when you get down to something like the feet. Or the head also carries a little bit of the characteristics of their skull. Another neat thing I like to look at here is the fact that their belly or their chest plate, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of like a natural looking sled. If you guys see that, so they have like a plate that covers their whole rib cage. We don't have that. We just kind of have a little, almost what's considered like a dagger shape in the middle of our chest, right? But they have a whole plate right there that's just kind of super solid bone structure. Another thing that we can look at too is that they don't really have a separate pelvis. The leg is just coming back here, and I'm assuming that this is a pelvis structure back here, but it's attached permanently to the rib cage, which is why penguins have to waddle to move. They have to move their whole body in order to move their leg. And you can see, which is I thought was really interesting, is that this leg is actually much longer than it appears. You would think that they just have these little stubby legs right here, but again, just like their neck, it actually goes pretty far up into their body and then attaches back into the rib cage there. So this leg would be looking something like this. So this stuff isn't necessarily important when we're thinking about drawing the penguin, because at the end of the day, we're not going to see a lot of this stuff. But it is important to know if you are drawing something like you want a penguin in motion, or you want to show some sort of action going on. It's important to know how these penguins would move, and in order to know how they move properly, you got to know what's going on the inside a little bit. So I found these illustrations right here. Really strong one right here of this one, where it shows the penguin in action and shows the anatomy of what's going on in the body. I thought that this one was really well done. The diagram to the left as well, also an awesome illustration. It just really shows how flexible the penguin can be, and we're really seeing what we would consider in life drawing that line of action. So knowing how the bones move is really important, but then what is also really important in understanding the structure and the shapes, of course, goes to the muscles. Now again, I want to emphasize that it was really hard to find any diagrams of penguins online. I'm sure there's books and structures and stuff like that out there, but the best that I could find was this example right here, And again, emphasizing the fact that this is one type of penguin. It is not indicative of all penguins, but for the most part, we can always just kind of assume that this is going to be their muscular structure, either shrunken down or enlarged, depending on the species. Now, I don't plan to go into this too far because, as you can see, their muscle structure, they definitely have a lot going on. But at the end of the day, all I'm seeing is that big oval bullet shape right there that attaches to their face. But realistically, if we really look at this on an actual penguin, there's probably a lot of blubber layer that's blocking all of that anyways. But this does kind of help us to determine what the shape is that's going on underneath, so that way we can draw the simple shape when we're starting to construct our penguins. Alright, so we're going to kick it off with this fluffy little baby penguin here. So what I'm going to do is I already have the shapes pre-drawn on top of our picture reference here, and I'm going to draw to the side. So we're going to start with the shapes that we see on the reference. So one of the things that I struggle with when I'm drawing something new to me, like I don't draw penguins all the time, I don't know if you guys do, but is getting the right height. So one trick that you can use if you guys have watched any of my life drawing videos, or if you take life drawing classes of your own, is you can always just take the head size of any creature you're drawing, but in this case penguin, and you just drag it down and you count how many heads there are. So this is a little baby guy, so we are only looking at 3.5 heads here. So on the side where I'm drawing, I'm just going to put that down. Now this isn't always necessary. If you guys want to just wing it, go ahead and wing it. I do later in some of the drawings, but just when you're trying to get a really accurate depiction of how big you want your drawing to be, and you just want it to look exactly like the picture, it's the easiest way to get that. Alright, another trick that I use is cutting it in half. So what this is going to do a couple things. It's going to show me where the weight is being distributed. Obviously this penguin is just standing straight up, so the weight is distributed evenly right down the middle. But it's also just going to give me a reference of where things kind of stand. You know, like I can look and see that the bill of the penguin is right through the center. We just goes right through the belly, and then the feet are off to the side of this line too. It's kind of a nice indication, so that way you don't accidentally draw 1 foot too far to the left or too far to the right. All right, simple shapes here, guys. This penguin, even though it is a baby, is pretty much gonna give us a hint of what all these penguins are gonna look like when we first start off drawing them. You got a circle for the head. You want to think of a nice plump egg kind of oval shape for the body. Remember, penguins live in really cold conditions, so they have a lot of layers. They have a lot of blubber and they have a lot of feather layer, especially the babies, because the babies got to stay warm, right? So once you have your under drawing in, you can always go back in and start drawing on some of your details. I'm only going to focus on the details on a few of these drawings here, and then for the most part we're just going to look at some of the sketches and simple shapes. But for this guy I had to go in. I mean, come on, it's a baby penguin, how can I resist drawing this guy? So we got those feet tucked in under the little fur there. So just nice and round. You can't really see too much detail because they're a really dark shape, so you just don't see that much going on in there, but you can kind of make sense of it, right? And then for the bill, we just have like a simple kind of diamond shape in there, and then I just threw another little triangle underneath it. Wanted to separate that eye pattern, and then get in those squinty little eyes too. Feel free to go ahead in and add some shade and color if you like, and then we're going to move on to the next one. Alright, so next penguin here, we're looking at one of the smaller guys. This one is not typically in the Arctic. So what you can see here, we're looking at a different kind of body shape, right? These guys aren't as tall, so they're not standing as upright. We have a bean shape for the body. We're looking at a couple of cylinders for the legs, and just kind of like, I always think of like a duck bill or something for the feet there. And then with that beak, I really wanted to think of the beak as a nice big 3D shape, so that's why I drew the full circle, drawing through my bill, and then I drew that bill on top. So we're gonna find the head size here. So we got this penguin standing at about 6 heads high. All right, let's go ahead and give this a try. So I'm gonna move it off to the side. Again, we're still starting with that simple circle shape. I'm gonna throw in some guidelines here just to remind me that the penguin is not looking straight at us. So this is just kind of a hint to me that I'm drawing this penguin looking to the left. I'm gonna drop down a couple head sizes for me, just in case I ended up drawing the head a little bit bigger or smaller than the reference. I wanna have the 6 heads as far as my drawing tells. And you can see I did draw the head a little bit bigger than we might see in that reference, but that's okay because it's actually a little bit shorter than 6 heads, so I think it's gonna work out. All right, so find my center line, which if you can see on the reference there, I did find the center line and it goes right over that right foot. So that's a pretty good hint to have. Just kind of helps you separate the body and kind of figure out where things lie. All right, so I'm trying to find that bean shape here. Curve it around. It's smaller on top, fatter at the bottom there. And remember, just try to throw in a simple shape. I always get really stuck and start complicating things really early on in the drawing, and that's a crutch that I'm trying to move out of. And I suggest that is something that you try not to build on either, if you can, because you just want to throw in a shape, even if you don't think you're going to keep it later on. Sometimes it's good just to have that placeholder that you can then change or move later. Instead of just having nothing there or trying to go overcomplicate it and then hating it. Because at the very least, if you just do in a simple shape, at least you're not stuck to it. You know, you can just erase it, change it. You're gonna see me change this guy a lot. I think I didn't like the left side here, so I'm gonna start trimming into it. All right, so I just want to get a little bit of a placement of my leg. So I know where that first leg is, the right leg, because of that center line that I drew down. So that's why I think the center line is pretty important there. And then this also helps me find my right foot. So once I kind of draw in a little duckbill, I can go ahead and give myself a little perspective line there. Make sure one foot is in front of the other. They don't sit on the same line, right? One foot is in front of the other. So if you remember from perspective, that tells us that the other foot, even though it's right there, it's right next to it, right? It's still a little bit further in space. So you always want to be thinking about that. I don't know if this is the best description, but when I was thinking of drawing this guy, the thing that kind of helped me in my mind was to think that this penguin was just kind of like arching his back and sticking out his booty. It's just like the descriptor that helped me when I was drawing this thing. Maybe that will help you, maybe it won't, but it just kind of helped me get the action of this pose because I just think he's standing really funny. But that's kind of the cute thing about penguins, right? All right, so knocking off a little bit of those shapes on the reference, and then I can start fleshing out our drawing here. So come in, I can add in a little bit more harder edges, find the neck where it connects to the body and stuff. And I can start to figure out a little more of my line work here, and you can start to really trim into your structure. Remember, that's why we draw simple shapes. It's not so we're stuck to it, it's so we can build on top of it or even trim it away. Alright, so I'm going to finish a couple details on this guy, and then we're going to move on to our next penguin. All right, so now we have our classic penguin in a tuxedo here, or the emperor penguin. At least I'm pretty sure it's an emperor penguin, but I'm sure if it's a king penguin, someone is going to correct me in the comments, so don't worry about it. But anyways, what we have here is a really tall penguin. These are some of the taller of the penguin species, so we want to make sure that we're really getting that length. So to me, it was important to find the head size on this one especially. I know I found them on the previous two also, but this one, it's just a really big body compared to its head size, and I really wanted to make sure it was in there. So you can see it's just shy of 8 heads, which if you didn't know, you might end up drawing something that's a little too stumpy or maybe too long. So that's why I like to find those proportions. But again, that's just my thing. Maybe that's not what you guys are into, so you guys got to find your own way of how you like to draw these. This got to find that center line there, so I can see that the center line is lining up again with that right foot of the penguin. So we just want to make sure that we have those details in there. I really love the stance of this penguin because it kind of just looked like he's like over it. Like he's just got his arms slinged down. Not exactly like he has many options of ways that he can hold his arms, but all right, throwing in some indication lines here. Just wanted to kind of remind myself of where the penguin's looking, so I threw in a line for the bill, and then I wanted to come in here and just kind of throw in my indication of the legs there. So it's always best to think of the legs as simply as you can at first. You got to remember that these are creatures that have a lot of coverage going on. So they have a lot of fur, a lot of layers. So you don't really see too much, and you want to try to stop yourself from adding details that might not even be there. So I always just try to think of it as like a noodle kind of cylinder shape in there. Throw it in. Make sure you have the pose right and the weight feels right is kind of like the goal here. Alright, so now we can come in and start fleshing out a little bit of details here. I'm just going to work on top of my first drawing now. And just kind of flesh in some of these details. So, important with this one, what I did was I made sure that the head and the body were disconnected in my simple shapes. And again, this was just for the illusion of more height, more length. In the previous ones, I kind of smashed the circle into the oval. And that's because I wanted them to look a little more stumpy, a little shorter. So that's just kind of what helped me give that appearance. So we have a nice big look at the flipper here. We're not going too far into detail with these guys today, but again, if once you have these drawings and you want to start shading them in, feel free. It's really easy to shade in these penguin shapes and get them going. Alright, we're going to add a few final touches on this guy, and then we'll move on to the next one. Alright, so I thought we could tackle a backside here. So here you see I got my lines laid out. Couple diagonal lines in here, and just one diagonal line. Going from wingtip to wingtip, because I just want to remind myself this guy is in motion. If you can see, one of his feet are lower than the other, or one of the feet are higher than the other, however you want to look at it, because this guy's walking. Maybe he doesn't like the person that's taking a picture of him. He's trying to get out of there. So I wanted to show that motion, and one of the ways to show motion is to have that tilt in the body. We do the same thing as when we walk, our pelvis tilts and our shoulders tilt. Same thing's going on in the penguin's body, even though they have that kind of more connected rib cage. So little indications like that where you can show the body shifting, really good tools. All right, so this is the only penguin that I drew that I thought had more of an oval looking head. Maybe it's just because it's such a side profile too, but I wanted to fit that oval in there. And then you can see here again, I am smashing the head shape into the body shape, because because again, we got a shorter guy here. He's not so tall and lengthy. So I do kind of want him to have that stumpy kind of feeling. You know, their heads just go right into their body. They don't really have a neck shape. Alright, throwing in some simple indications here of the wings. Again, trying to remember that one is lower than the other. Alright, taking off some of that shapes there so I can see my reference. And you can see there I pointed to both the feet there, like I was saying earlier. You know, that one is higher than the other, so you want to think about that in terms of what is your penguin doing. Alright, so now that I have the simple shapes, then I could really easily go in and start adding some of these details in there. And there you go. So wanted to make that a little bit higher. Really emphasize that this guy is on the move. I thought it was really interesting in their wings. It's not just like a simple curve kind of shape. They have like a zigzag going on in there. Not exactly sure what that's for, but it's part of their pattern. Most all of them I've seen have that kind of jagged shape in there, and I think it's kind of part of their bone structure. Alright, we're going to finish off this wing. We're going to give this guy a little bit more facial features, and then we're going to move on to an exciting action pose. Have you guys ever seen anything more graceful than the way this penguin moves? But for real, I really like this pose because he is taking a nice big step. He's walking. We see that penguin waddle. And so we want to remember in life drawing, which this is animal life drawing, right? When people are in motion, we got to have an action line generally, right? So he's moving. He's got a nice curve to his body. His weight is all on one leg. So I wanted to make sure we really emphasize that action line that you can see in green there on the reference. So that's what I started with. I started with the action line, and then now I'm going to build my shapes around it because that's what's going to help me keep that motion going on and the movement, the walking of this penguin. I'm going in without my head shapes too, so if this is what you guys were looking for, is something without such complicated or technical approaches to it, you can take a look at this. I was just kind of winging it and guessing it, which is something that you can definitely do, especially if you've done the head shape thing a few times. You can start to kind of get a feel for the size and shape, and then you can also just use your own artistic ideals of what you think, how long or how short is this penguin, and it can always be changed if you want because it's your own drawing and creation. Alright, so really sticking this guy's leg up here. I like how we had like a bent kind of foot there too, so focusing on that shovel kind of shape. And remember, when these guys walk, they gotta waddle, so one of his sides is turning, which is why we only see a little bit of that right flipper, and then we're seeing a little more of that left flipper there. Alright, connecting it in. Remember that that beak is pointing up in the sky. The cool thing about the penguin beaks is that they really just flow straight back into the head. It's not like a hard shape or separation. Alright, get that guy's eye in and throw in some of these nails. And then clean this up a little bit. And then we got one more penguin to go. All right, last penguin for today. So here we go. We're gonna get this guy going. I really like the shape, and you can see the arrow here. What I'm trying to indicate is that his chest is really protruding out. It really sticks out far away from his head. And if you could see in that diagram where I took the picture off there for a second, how small his head is compared to his body. It looks really silly when it's not, in the picture reference. But it's one of the things where sometimes you want to be able to see this just so you know it's real. So we're going to go ahead in there, give it a small head, draw my center line down. I'm not going to focus too much on the head size here, so don't worry about that if you guys are not head size people, but I'm just going to give myself a little indication of where I think the bottom of this penguin is going to be. Create that beak line. So that beak line is, again, just letting me know that his head is tilted up a little bit, right? He's not just looking straight. And I really wanted to emphasize how bulky his body is compared to his head, for one thing. And then also just that chest that is sticking out. I really like that shape. It's such a nice contrast against all the soft roundness of his body. He also had these really big floppy clown feet there. I don't know if that's typical, but those just look massive on this dude. Alright, throwing in this little bit of a pouch here. So I'm going to start fleshing this guy out a little bit now that we had our simple shapes thrown in. So remember that that chin just kind of flows straight into the beak, and then the beak flows right back into the head. And their heads are actually kind of squared off a little bit. Not super round, but it's up to your guys' discretion on that one. So what really separates penguins from the other penguins is the pattern on their body. So that's why I always like to kind of get it in there, even if it's a quick indication of where the pattern lies. And definitely it's a nice tool for if I ever want to come back and finish this. I already have it all laid out for me, and I can just kind of fill my colors in. Alright, I'm going to give this guy an eye that looks just like me in every Zoom meeting, and clean him up, and then I think we're good to go on this one. I hope you guys found this video helpful. I hope you guys were able to draw some of these penguins along with me. I tried to keep it slow this time, so that way you guys had plenty of time to draw the simple shapes with me. If you guys have suggestions for more animals in the future, please let me know. Do you want to see more penguins, or do you want to see more cats? We can always go over some more of those as well. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.